Okay, let's unpack this. Today we are dedicating this deep dive to a really exceptionally potent and emotionally dense topic.
It really is.
We're looking at understanding the pervasive tyranny of childhood shame, specifically, how it influences the entire emotional landscape, achievement patterns, relationships, all that stuff for many gay men, often well into their adult lives.
Yeah, this is such a crucial area of psychological exploration. And we're focusing today on insights drawn from clinical practice, personal narratives, particularly as compiled in the work The Velvet Rage.
Right.
And this material, it doesn't just describe a problem, which is important, but it goes further. It really provides a kind of comprehensive roadmap.
Okay.
Tracing the journey from this really deep, toxic, internalized shame through often decades of complex, sometimes compensatory behaviors.
Right, trying to make up for it somehow.
Exactly.
Oh,
And then ultimately, hopefully, toward the challenging path of cultivating genuine authenticity and, maybe finding some contentment.
So our mission here, it's got to be more than just summarizing, right? We need to really dissect the core emotional wound that drives this whole lifelong process. And what immediately jumps out from this work is this central paradox. It's not necessarily the man wakes up every day feeling like this crippling, acute surface-level shame.
No, precisely. That's such a key distinction. The core issue is much deeper rooted than just daily embarrassment or guilt. It's a private, deeply entrenched and sort of unwavering core belief.
Okay.
It lives beneath everything the man does. And that belief is basically, if you really knew the whole unvarnished truth about me, you would know that I am fundamentally unlovable.
Wow. That's heavy.
It is. And this internal certainty creates what the source powerfully calls the damned quest for external validation.
The damned quest.
Yeah, it's this relentless, almost manic pursuit of perfection, that often pushes men to these exhilarating highs, professionally, socially.
Right, high achievers.
Exactly. But at the same time, it brings them right to the brink of, emotional collapse.
That distinction is just vital, isn't it? It's not just about overcoming a feeling like being embarrassed. It's about restructuring a core belief about your own self-worth.
Absolutely.
And that driving force, that unlovable core, propelling this endless search for proof of worthiness, that's really the foundation for everything we're going to talk about today.
That's it. That's the engine.
So, to get a handle on the rage, this quest, we have to start right at the beginning, don't we?
Absolutely. Infancy, the essential vulnerability. We come into the world utterly helpless, completely love-starved creatures. We depend entirely on our parents, our primary caretakers, for everything, emotional safety, physical survival.
It's primal.
Totally primal. This craving for unconditional love, protection.
Yeah.
It's not just a nice to have, it's an irrepressible, constant biological longing. It dictates all our earliest behaviors.
And the stakes are incredibly high, biologically speaking. For an infant, abandonment, the withdrawal of that love protection, it feels like death.
It is perceived as death, fundamentally. So the young human has this absolute non-negotiable drive. Retain parental love at all costs. Every cry, every smile, every attempt to please. Even tantrums. It's all geared towards survival by securing that bond.
Okay, so this intense dependency, it sets the stage for what comes next.
Exactly. The first major psychological trauma, this usually picks in somewhere between, say, 4 and 6 years old.
Right around when you start noticing the world outside your immediate family.
Precisely. It's the period when the child begins to sense, maybe dimly at first, that they are different.
Different how?
They realize they're not quite like the other kids on the playground. Or maybe they sense a subtle but significant mismatch between themselves and their parents, especially the same-sex parent. It's this dawning awareness, often subconscious initially, that they're somehow misaligned, out of step with the family or society's script.
And it's not always about something obvious, is it? Like the example you mentioned, Cal from Omaha.
Yeah, that's a great illustration. He talked about stealing a Playboy with his friends.
Right.
And while the other boys were, focused on the pictures, he realized his real interest was watching their excitement, their reactions.
So he was already performing.
Exactly. He said he was going along with it just for show. He already knew he had to play the accepted role. And that starts this incredibly long, exhausting process of hiding who you truly are.
And this growing knowledge, this sense of being different. It must be terrifying for a kid that age.
It generates an equally expanding terror.
Yeah.
The paralyzing fear that this specific difference, whatever it is, if it gets exposed, will cause them to lose that essential, life-sustaining parental love and affection.
And they can't change who they are.
Right. So what do? They immediately, instinctively change how they act. They start hiding the truth. Often they might cozy up to their mothers, who they see as emotionally safer.
Makes sense.
While distancing themselves from their fathers, because subconsciously they sense dad might be the source of emotional rejection, or maybe even worse, if the secret gets out.
And this hiding, it doesn't stay contained within the family, does it?
No way. It quickly extends outwards. The fear of rejection isn't just about mom and dad. You see it early on with peers, where rejection can be, well, brutally merciless.
The playground can be rough.
It's an early crucible of abuse, absolutely. Kids are just acutely tuned in to perceive differences.
Like Tom from Portland. That story was tough.
Yeah, really tough. He developed this deep, abiding hatred for school, specifically gym class, always the last picked for team.
Oh, it's classic. Awful.
And the other boys relentlessly taunting him, calling him a sissy. This early, repetitive, devastating abuse from peers, combined with that underlying existential terror of losing parental acceptance. It just solidifies one powerful, enduring, toxic lesson in the kid's mind.
And that lesson becomes psychological bedrock, right?
Completely. It sinks right in. There is something about my essential self, my essence, that is fundamentally disgusting, aberrant, essentially unlovable.
Wow.
And this belief, formed way back then between 4 and 6, it becomes the engine for pretty much all subsequent dysfunction.
And within the family dynamics, there's often one figure whose role is particularly crucial here. The father.
Yes, the father. The source material really highlights this. A central trauma often stems from the emotional absence, the invalidation, delivered by the first man that we love, arguably the man we will love the most in our life.
That really emphasizes the stakes, doesn't it?
Immense stakes tied to this relationship. And this father figure, he's often a man of contradictions, right? Capable of great things in the world, maybe a silent influence at home, a provider.
Sure.
But frequently, he's the man who stops hugging his boys after a certain age, maybe 12. Or he's just incapable of giving that necessary emotional validation right when his son needs it most.
And the source calls this absence an emotional betrayal of the worst sort. Why that specific strong language?
Because that emotional absence, that inability to affirm the son right at the moment the son is grappling with his difference, it confirms the child's deepest, darkest fear.
It validates the fear.
Exactly. It's like an emotional communication saying, I cannot love the true you. And that leaves this profound structural wound that impacts every future relationship with men. It's a primal injury suggesting male intimacy itself is conditional, fragile.
You really see the long-term devastation in that story of Tom from Seattle.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking. His mother told his father he was gay.
But they never talked about it.
Never once spoke about it, not a single word. His father knew, Tom knew, his father knew. But they just couldn't bear to acknowledge the truth together.
And now his father's gone.
And Tom grieves. He grieves for the relationship they never had, the lost friendship. He realizes they were never able to connect authentically. That silence, that emotional distance from the first man they loved, it stands as this permanent, reinforcing proof that their essential self is just too flawed, too disappointing to be accepted.
Just brutal.
Okay, so once this core shame, this belief of being fundamentally unlovable is like firmly entrenched, the individual spends the rest of their formative years, and often much of adulthood, just trying to manage the immense, overwhelming psychological distress it causes.
Right. It's all about coping.
Exactly. And the source material maps this onto two distinct, often pretty destructive psychological stages before any real healing can even begin.
Okay, so stage 1, what's that look like?
Stage 1 is dominated by the instinct to hide and run. It's characterized by being utterly overwhelmed by the shame.
Just drowning in it.
Drowning in it, leading to these extreme strategies designed purely to keep the secret buried in the true self perpetually out of sight. And the primary mechanism for survival here is a concept we really need to unpack: splitting. Splitting is a defense mechanism. The ego basically divides your life into two rigidly separated compartments.
Like watertight compartments.
Totally watertight. You have the acceptable, conforming public self. That's the self that gets whatever validation is available. And then you have the secretive, often dark, true self, which holds all the shame.
Why the split? Why not just integrate?
Because the shame is perceived as so lethal, so dangerous, that integrating the two selves feels like it would invite immediate catastrophic destruction, like social or emotional death. So the man has to believe on some level that both selves exist simultaneously but independently. They can't touch.
And this split life, it must dictate relationship patterns, right?
Absolutely. It means meeting men covertly, often in places that emphasize anonymity, parks, chat rooms, rest stops.
Places where you don't have to be you.
Exactly. Engaging in sexual activity, sometimes without even exchanging names. The anonymity shields the true, shameful self. But the mental gymnastics used to justify it all. That's key.
How do they rationalize it?
They convince themselves they aren't actually gay. They're just bisexual, curious, and damned horny.
Framing it as just a behavior, not an identity.
Precisely. They rationalize the behavior as this minor, controllable vice, something separate. It protects the public self from being contaminated by the shame.
The case of Ken really highlights how destructive this splitting is.
Yeah, Ken's story is powerful. He was in a long-distance relationship with Gabe, who wanted monogamy.
Okay.
But Ken was engaging in hundreds of anonymous online hookups. Hundreds. And he masterfully dodged any serious talk about monogamy or the future, claiming he was just protecting Dave from the pain of finding out.
But was he really?
Well, the psychological dynamic suggests he was primarily protecting himself from the shame of having to admit he lived this dual, dishonest life. If he confessed, the shame would rupture his carefully constructed public persona.
And maintaining that facade was more important than an authentic relationship.
It seems so. The drive to avoid the shame was stronger.
What other strategies pop up in stage 1?
Another major one is substance abuse. And this isn't just random addiction, alcohol, drugs. They're used specifically as a highly effective avoidance mechanism.
To numb the pain.
To numb the pain, exactly. To cope with the intense, ever-present distress caused by that internalized shame, the substance temporarily quiets that harsh internal critic.
And the cost. It can be catastrophic. Mitch's story.
Oh, Mitch. Yeah, that's truly tragic. He maintained a girlfriend, held a job, looked okay on the surface.
Yeah.
But internally, he was spiraling. Quitting jobs and sudden rages, his inner life just chaos.
And ultimately?
Ultimately, he died by suicide. He left a note that just conveyed the crushing weight of his secret. It read, in part, "I'd rather be dead than be gay." The self-medication was his attempt to keep that devastating truth locked away, but it wasn't enough.
God, that's rough. And Travis, too. His story with his father.
Travis's history involved severe verbal and physical torment from his father. Constant abuse, calling him a goddamn faggot.
So he internalized that hatred.
Deeply. Into this crushing sense of self-loathing, and he relied on a quart of hard liquor every single day just to manage that intense, agonizing shame.
A whole quart. Daily.
Daily. So when he finally sought treatment, tried to get sober, guess what happened?
The shame came flooding back.
Immediately. Rushed back with such intensity, it caused profound hopelessness, this desperate drive to just isolate. For Travis, the alcohol was the only functioning shield he had against that raw self-hatred.
So this pattern, avoidance through splitting, through substances.
Yeah.
It leads to this fundamental problem, right?
Yeah.
The problem of inauthentic validation.
Yes. That's a crux of stage 1's failure. Validation is necessary for us psychologically. Like love was in infancy, we need it.
Sure.
But if you're validated, praised, admired for a pretense, for a false, inauthentic self built entirely on hiding your core truth, that validation is psychologically hollow.
It doesn't actually land anywhere real.
Exactly. It has no basis in the man's actual reality. It doesn't touch or satisfy that deep longing for acceptance of the real self.
It's like psychological junk food. Looks good, fills you up for a second, but there's no nourishment.
Perfect analogy. You're fed constantly with praise or attention, but the food is entirely devoid of nutrition. The individual achieves the external markers success, admiration, but internally the feeling is just profound hollowness.
Which drives the endless need to keep faking it. Like Nick from Jacksonville.
Yeah, Lick voices that fatigue so well. He says he's just tired of faking it, hating the gym, despising the cocktail parties, preferring to just sit at home watching bad TV.
But he can't.
But he feels he has to maintain the public image of the successful, gregarious guy.
So that gnawing hollowness, the failure of just hiding, that pushes people into the next stage.
It propels the shift into stage 2, compensating for shame. This is a major pivot point. Instead of just hiding the shame, the man decides to overwrite it, annihilate it with brilliance.
Wow.
The strategy is now to achieve a level of external perfection and accomplishment so dazzling, so undeniable that no one, including himself, hopefully, could possibly question his worth.
The if I'm perfect, I can't be flawed logic.
Exactly. The temporary comfort comes from that conscious or subconscious reasoning. If everyone else thinks I'm great, if I achieve everything, then surely I must be great.
And this is where we see that intense focus on external markers, the stuff society values.
Totally. Becoming supremely knowledgeable, culture, fashion, art, the quest for Adonis-sized proportions in the gym.
Right. The perfect body.
The accumulation of wealth, high professional success, being the fabulous and outrageous host. They're constructing this compensatory persona, a beautiful, shining shield designed to repel any possibility of judgment or shame finding a crack.
But this shield, this facade, it's built on shaky ground.
Toxic foundation, because the self-worth is entirely external, tethered to that performance. The tolerance for invalidation becomes dangerously low. Meaning any minor slight, any criticism, any perceived abandonment, it isn't just a disagreement or a mistake. It's perceived instantly as confirmation of that deep core belief. See, I am unlovable after all.
Which makes relationships incredibly precarious.
Extremely. The source gives that vivid, almost shocking example, the 20-year friendship.
Oh yeah, terminated abruptly.
In an angry, declarative fashion. Why? Because his friend, a doctor, missed a rescheduled lunch.
But the doctor had a dying patient.
Exactly, a dying patient at the hospital. But the friend, John, was so enraged by the perceived slight, the perceived lack of care for his importance, that months later, he just cut off the relationship entirely.
It wasn't about the lunch?
Never about the lunch. It was about the perceived confirmation of his own worthlessness. The invalidation hit that raw nerve.
And when this compensatory strategy starts to fail, when the job isn't fulfilling anymore, the body isn't perfect, the validation feels empty, what happens then?
That's when intense rage emerges. Capital R rage. It's overwhelming anger that demands a target. It's the emotional fallout of being caught in this impossible double bind, starving for something real but only getting external substitutes.
And this rage, it gets misdirected, right?
Almost always. It doesn't hit the source, the shame, the emptiness. No, it finds the most convenient, often vulnerable victim.
Like
the slow checker at the grocery store, the employee who made a tiny error, the partner who didn't lavish quite enough praise that morning. Or devastatingly, it turns inward. Self-hatred, crushing depression. The rage is this desperate attempt to regain psychological control by imposing their will, often tyrannically, on their immediate environment or on themselves.
And this feeds into a really destructive pattern around mistakes.
A vicious cycle of mistakes. Right. Yeah. Because shame is so profoundly distressing, the avoidance mechanism demands that mistakes be avoided at all costs, suppressed, their memory cooked or twisted so it's someone else's fault.
Which leads to an existential tragedy.
Totally. Because mistakes are necessary for learning, for behavioral change, for growth. If you instantly cover every error in shame and denial, you're condemned to repeat the same dysfunctional patterns. You're moving forward without ever looking back, and you keep ending up in the same place.
Going in circles.
Perpetually going in circles.
And this resistance even shows up in therapy.
Oh, absolutely. The client resists examining past mistakes. They might spend sessions seeking validation for blaming ex-partners, ex-bosses, essentially trying to get the therapist to co-sign their avoidance of shame rather than facing it.
So, stage 2 compensation. It often hits a wall later in life.
It often runs headlong into a profound crisis of meaning, usually in the 40s or 50s. This is the point where the strategy just starts to lose its effectiveness. Looks might soften, the social scene changes, professional success just doesn't deliver the promised fulfillment anymore.
Like Doug from Los Angeles, that Peggy Lee song quote.
Yeah. Is that all there is? He articulated it perfectly. By the time I was 45, I felt I had seen and done it all. I had the money, the looks, the house, the trips, but now what? The compensation built a life, maybe? But it failed to build a meaningful self.
And when that crisis hits, the temptation is to double down.
Often, yeah. Men attempt to foreclose on stage 3. They seek a rapid external solution to escape the inner, grinding boredom and existential ambiguity. Foreclosure means trying harder at the same old failing strategies.
Like what?
More men, more extreme sex, more achievement, more partying. Just more of the same, but louder.
Chris bouncing between boyfriends and cities.
Exactly. Relentlessly moving, seeking to escape the boredom that followed him everywhere, believing the fix was a change of scenery, not a change of self.
Or Jay joining a monastery. Ben marrying the much younger guy.
Right. Jay's monastery move, Ben's whirlwind romance and quick marriage, only to be left soon after. These dramatic moves are just another form of desperate avoidance, a quick fix trying to escape the ambiguity, the discomfort of genuine internal change.
So this whole foundation, the shame, the compensation,
Yeah.
it inevitably messes with relationships, right? Deeply.
Profoundly inhibits the capacity for genuine, sustained intimacy.
Yeah.
The psychological fallout often manifests as relationship trauma, starting way back with those formative but often damaging first failed loves and the loss of innocence.
These are the early connections. Maybe intense friendships, maybe secret physical relationships.
Exactly. They're formative because they represent the first time the young man attempts to share his shameful true self, even partially, with another male.
A huge risk.
Huge risk. But because they're often shrouded in secrecy, denial, they're acutely prone to catastrophic failure. These relationships often steal their innocence by confirming that deep-seated fear of betrayal.
Gore Vidal's story about Jimmy Trumbull, that really illustrates the lasting power.
It really does. His lifelong infatuation with Trimble, his handsome high school love who died young. Vidal described him decades later as the unfinished business of my life.
Wow.
Decades later.
It just confirms how potent these first connections are, especially if they're wounded by secrecy or separation. They leave this indelible emotional imprint no matter how much external success you gain later.
But the wounds aren't always just about separation, right? Sometimes it's active betrayal.
Oh, absolutely. We
Yeah.
see classic betrayal trauma in Michael's story.
With his college roommate, Philip.
Yeah. They had this ritualistic, mutually devoted sexual relationship, always under the guise of being drunk, pretending it didn't count. Michael was completely devoted, sacrificed everything for their secret connection.
But it ended badly. Terribly. Publicly. Philip, suddenly terrified of exposure, just threw Michael under the bus. Told everyone Michael had tried to seduce him.
Oh, no.
And Michael, years later, a grown man in his 40s telling this story, still wept. Still meticulously went over memories, trying to find any sign Philip had been unwilling.
What was the long-term consequence for Michael?
Catastrophic. Never spoke to Philip again, and decades later struggled deeply with the basic ability to trust any future lover. That betrayal just shattered his foundation for trust.
That sounds incredibly intense.
Yeah.
Does this kind of thing really reach the level of clinical PTSD, or is that stretching the definition?
It's not stretching it, actually. Emotional injury of this nature genuinely shares defining symptoms with post-traumatic stress disorder. Neuroscientists suggest that emotional memories, particularly those involving extreme fear or betrayal, they might not fade. They can essentially be forever in terms of their potency.
So the trauma stays active.
When relationship trauma is active, yeah, the victim is constantly experiencing symptoms, reliving it through nightmares, flashbacks, or actively avoiding anything, thoughts, people, situations that reminds them of the original betrayal.
Okay, the avoidance and flashbacks make sense. But the source also mentions suffering from a foreshortened future. What's that mean here?
It means the trauma is so overwhelming, it literally prevents the person from imagining a normal, long life trajectory for themselves. They don't expect to have a lasting career, get married, live a long, contented life, because the world just feels inherently dangerous and conditional after that betrayal.
Wow. So it shrinks their sense of possibility.
Completely.
Yeah.
And when someone with this background is in a relationship, the partnership stops being a source of comfort or satisfaction. It transforms into, as the source puts it, a very tiring job.
A job?
Yeah, where they are constantly, exhaustively scanning the environment, their partner's behavior, moods, words for the next inevitable sign of betrayal. It's exhausting.
And this vulnerability, this history, it naturally leads to some really complex, often toxic adult relationship patterns, like infidelity.
Infidelity often crops up because that compensatory stage is still running the show. One partner just can't find authentic validation within the relationship.
Because maybe they can't show their real self, or the partner can't see it.
Right. So they rationalize acts of betrayal, seeking that external hit of validation or excitement elsewhere. We hear JT from NYC talking about his affair.
Yeah.
He basically started it because he was trying to keep up with his primary lover, Jess, who was apparently sleeping all over town. It becomes this competitive cycle of fooling around.
Which just destroys trust.
Annihilates any possibility of trust or grounded connection. They're seeking external proof of their desirability because the internal proof is still missing.
And then there are those really painful, entrenched patterns.
Yeah.
Ambivalent relationships.
Yes. These can endure for years and create such deep emotional distress. Dan's lover, Mark, is the perfect painful example.
What did Mark do?
Mark would radically alternate. Intense, seductive attention, 1 minute. then sudden freezing withdrawal and harsh criticism the next.
Whiplash.
Total whiplash. Mark might call Dan every night while traveling, professing deep commitment, then completely ignore him during the next trip. But if Mark sensed Dan pulling away, maybe thinking of leaving,
Then he'd turn the charm back on.
instantly, suddenly become incredibly attentive, caring, often dramatically ramping up the sexual interest. This push-pull, approach-avoidance behavior, it confuses and disorients the recipient. It leads to a state clinically called relationship helplessness.
Relationship helplessness, what is that exactly?
It's this deeply toxic belief that settles in, the conviction that nothing you do or say will positively influence the relationship's outcome. You're powerless.
So people just give up.
They give up, they settle for less, they rationalize staying in deeply unsatisfying partnerships. They start seeing the relationship as something inflicted on them rather than something they co-create.
Like Tim and Walter.
Yeah.
Together 25 years, sleeping in the same bed but never touching.
Yeah. And Tim rationalized his sadness by saying, look around, all relationships end up this way. Just resignation.
Yeah.
Helplessness.
And hovering over all of this, there's a broader structural issue, right? The struggle against toxic masculine ideals.
Yes, absolutely crucial. Gay men inherit and internalize these rigid societal definitions of manhood, just like straight men do. But these ideals actively contradict the very things needed for emotional healing and authentic connection.
Where's the main conflict point there? How does it specifically impact gay men trying to connect?
Well, the ideals provide a terrible framework for intimacy. Think about it. Showing feelings is for women.
Right. Vulnerability equals weakness.
Exactly. So emotional vulnerability, which is the absolute key to intimacy, gets framed as something shameful to be avoided. Then there's intimacy is sex.
Reducing deep connection to just physical performance.
Precisely. Then I am what I earn, tying self-worth irrevocably to professional and financial success, which just feeds right back into that stage 2 compensation machine.
Making it even harder to break free.
And maybe the most insidious one, no one can hurt you if you are strong. This is the ultimate defense against shame, right? Build an emotional fortress. But that fortress keeps out authentic love just as effectively as it keeps out potential injury.
So the very cultural script they've been taught about how to be a successful man actively sabotages the tools they need for real relationships. They're fighting the script constantly.
Constantly fighting an internal battle against the script they were handed.
Okay, so after navigating all that, the shame, the avoidance, the compensation, the relationship trauma, there has to be a way out, right? Stage 3.
Yes. The ultimate shift, the way out of the decades of rage and compulsive behavior, lies in reaching stage 3. And this stage is marked by the cultivation of authenticity. This is the psychological revolution that finally breaks the cycle.
Authenticity. It sounds good, but what does it actually look like in practice, especially after years, maybe decades, of performing and hiding?
It's a radical act. Authenticity means showing your complete self to the world. Not the polished, compensated facade, not the secretive, split-off self, but the whole, flawed, messy, human entity.
It sounds terrifying.
It is terrifying. But only by taking that risk can the world respond with authentic validation. And this is the only kind of praise, acceptance, or love that can actually reach and satisfy that deep, primal longing created by the original childhood shame.
So authentic self gets authentic validation.
Exactly. And as this genuine validation surges validation for who you really are, the rage, which was just a byproduct of seeking validation in all the wrong, inauthentic places, begins to steadily dissipate. It loses its fuel.
But getting there, it's not easy. The path to authenticity means embracing ambiguity, uncertainty, which is why some people try to shortcut it.
Right. Many men attempt to foreclose on stage 3. They try to find a quick external fix for what is fundamentally an internal problem because the internal work is slow and uncomfortable.
Like Jay's selling everything and joining a monastery.
Classic example. Seeking ultimate meaning and purpose through a radical external change. Or Ben traveling the world to find himself.
Only to jump right into another relationship.
Immediately into a fast-paced, ill-considered romance with a much younger man. Both were trying to escape the hard, slow work of internal growth through dramatic external actions, relocation, commitment, whatever. They're basically fleeing the ambiguity of finding out who they really are without the old props.
So real resolution, real contentment. It's found by shifting focus inward.
Entirely inward, specifically through the sustained, ongoing pursuit of what the Source calls the 3 pillars of contentment: passion, love, and integrity. These are the guideposts for an authentic life.
Okay, let's break those down. Pillar 1, Passion.
Passion. It's described as a complex, almost coded feeling unique to each person. When you find it, it consistently produces surprising and satisfying joy.
Okay, joy.
But here's the critical distinction. Passion is a meta-emotion.
Meta-emotion.
Yeah, it's not the initial feeling of joy itself. It's the feeling that comes after you observe that the same activity consistently brings about that primary emotion of joy over time. You recognize the pattern.
So you don't necessarily feel passion in the moment, but you look back and realize, hey, that thing consistently makes me feel joy.
Exactly. The example of Danny, the depressed sculptor, makes this so clear.
Right, his mind filtered out the good stuff.
His depressive mind was trained to notice only the negative, filtering out anything positive. When he was creating these beautiful, useful metal objects, he experienced brief, intense spikes of joy. But his mind instantly discounted them, like, nah, that doesn't count.
So how did he find his passion?
The key for Danny, and for anyone seeking passion, was learning to notice the joy. He had to consciously pause, reflect, and allow that quiet feeling of satisfaction to penetrate the depressive fog. He had to realize the process of creation was the thing consistently generating positive emotional output. That's how he identified his passion.
Okay, makes sense. Pillar 2, love.
Love, also identified as a meta-emotion.
Yeah.
And critically, stage 3 love is based not on a checklist of external criteria, but on noticing joy in the consistent presence of another person.
Ah, so it's about the feeling with them, not about them.
Precisely. This is the crucial break from stages 1 and 2. In those stages, what was mistaken for love was often just appreciation for someone who helped avoid shame. He's gorgeous, successful, rich, addicted like me, whatever.
He validates my facade.
Right. Stage 3 love ignores those superficial or compensatory features. You're no longer seeking someone who ticks all the boxes. You're seeking someone who simply stirs an unspeakable happiness within you consistently day after day, regardless of their age, abs, or bank account. It's about the resonant feeling.
Okay. And the third pillar, integrity.
Integrity. Contentment requires striving to be as honest as possible, and this means fundamentally avoiding giving an inaccurate impression, even passively, like through omission, holding back truths.
So it's more than just not telling outright lies.
Much more profound. It's about radical honesty that dictates action. Secrets, even small omissions. They create emotional distance. The work uses that powerful metaphor of two parallel lines.
Right. They slowly diverge.
Exactly. If one line slowly changes its trajectory, you don't notice the difference at first. But over time, the distance grows farther and farther apart until they're completely disconnected. Passive dishonesty, holding back truths, has that same corrosive effect on intimacy.
So the goal is a kind of honesty that sticks with facts, keeps the other person connected with reality, not some fantasy built on your secrecy.
That's the essence of it. It builds trust and true connection.
Okay, so cultivating passion, love, integrity. That's the goal. But getting there requires more than just understanding this stuff, right? Insight isn't enough.
Absolutely not. Knowing your history, knowing why you're wounded or why you defaulted to compensation, that doesn't intrinsically change behavior. It's necessary, but not sufficient.
So what does change behavior?
Change requires learning and actively practicing new essential skills for authentic living. These are focused entirely on deliberate behavioral change in the here and now.
Okay, let's dig into those skills. What are the key ones for making different life choices?
The first life choice skill is powerful. When facing a decision, ask yourself, what would the man I wish to become do in this situation?
Ah, so it anchors you in your values, not your fear.
Immediately. It forces you to access your deeply held core values, bypassing the immediate emotional reaction, which is usually rooted in that old shame avoidance or compensation pattern.
Okay, that's a good one.
What else? The second is maybe the most valuable for a long-term emotional survival. The concept of placing inner peace above all else.
Inner peace above all else. How does that work?
When faced with competing options, maybe one promises huge success, money, intense excitement, versus another that holds the greatest promise of bringing long-term inner peace, the authentic man learns to choose peace, even if it looks less glamorous.
Alex's story is a stark warning here.
Oh, Alex, the junior high teacher. A perfect cautionary tale. He was instantly smitten with Craig because Craig was incredibly hot-looking.
Right, the external attraction.
And he ignored massive, glaring red flags. Craig's eventual crystal meth use, his cruising for three-ways, his ultimate arrest for sexual relations with a minor. Alex ignored it all because he was completely swept up by the intense heat.
He chose heat over peace.
He literally sacrificed his career, his safety, his long-term well-being for a relationship that was clearly destroying his inner peace because the external attraction felt more compelling in the moment.
Okay, so beyond big life choices, what about the day-to-day emotional skills? Managing distress, conflict.
First up is acceptance. And this means radically accepting what is the reality of the situation, however unpleasant, before you try to change it.
Accepting reality doesn't mean approving of it, though.
Absolutely not. That's the key distinction. Refusing to accept reality is the core source of so much distress. Keith, for example, refused to accept his boss was a cutthroat who always took credit for his work.
So he stayed angry.
Stayed angry, full of quiet rage. Now, accepting it wouldn't magically make the anger vanish, but his distress would lessen dramatically. Acceptance means acknowledging, okay, this is who my boss is, even if you don't approve. It stops the futile fight against what is. Similarly, accepting an HIV status doesn't mean liking the virus, but it stops the hiding, which causes way more distress.
Gotcha. Okay, next skill.
Non-judgmentalism. Given the immense toxic shame they've internalized, many gay men become highly judgmental of themselves and others.
As a defense.
Absolutely. That judgment, the cynicism, the constant critique, it's a defense mechanism. It keeps others, and even the self, at a safe emotional distance, but it makes authenticity impossible.
So suspend judgment.
Suspend judgment. Adopt a non-judgmental stance. Allow others the space to be human, flawed, complex. Rather than rushing to a conclusion based on perceived flaws, it disarms your own internal critic and creates space for empathy, which you need for connection.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What else?
A third critical skill, especially around hostility or conflict, defaulting to forgiveness. This means cultivating the belief that other people generally have reasons for their behavior, even if those reasons are unknown to us or seem completely disagreeable.
That sounds hard.
It is hard, but forgiveness in this sense is a gift you give yourself. It means allowing others to not live up to my fantasies of who I wish they were.
But it doesn't mean being a doormat.
Crucial caveat, no. Forgiveness doesn't mean abandoning boundaries or letting someone back into your inner circle if they consistently inflict harm. It's simply about accepting the truth about them without judgment or expectation. This hugely reduces your own personal distress and stops the energy drain of nursing a grudge.
Okay. And the final skill, especially in conflict.
The ultimate skill that really unlearns that old shame-based habit of instantly blaming others. Assess your responsibility first.
Oof. That's tough.
Incredibly difficult for someone conditioned by shame to avoid blame at all costs. But before focusing on what the other person did wrong, the authentic man pauses and asks, okay, what part did I play in creating this problem? What was my contribution?
Why is that so important?
Because owning your part first actually improves the dynamic, and critically, it reduces the intensity of your own shame. Because once you own your behavior, you start to realize the true shame isn't in making a mistake, it's in the hiding of the mistake. Owning it diffuses its power. #tag outro.
Wow. This has been, a really profound exploration of a complex emotional journey.
It really covers a lot of ground.
We've basically traced the arc from that emotional adolescent man, the Peter Pan figure constantly running from the shadow of shame,
Right.
to potentially becoming a man who is more grounded, more at peace, maybe finally fulfilled, but only through the consistent practice of these skills.
That's the key takeaway, isn't it? Reinforced across all the stages. Mere insight into the past, not enough. Knowing why you're wounded, why you compensated or avoided, it doesn't automatically change things.
It's necessary, but not sufficient.
Exactly. Change requires the challenging, sometimes tedious daily work of learning and practicing new skills. Passion, love, integrity, acceptance, taking responsibility consistently, day by day.
And the ultimate payoff, the joy, the contentment. It's not found in the big, extravagant facade, the parties, the successes that define stages 1 and 2.
No, it's found in how life is lived, in the quieter moments, actually. Moments of authentic connection, honest relationships, pursuing things you're genuinely passionate about. That's where the real satisfaction lies.
Which brings us right back to that initial devastating core wound of shame.
The paradox holds. The only way to truly reduce the distress of shame isn't to run faster or build higher walls.
Is to turn towards it.
It's to move toward it, to expose yourself to it gently, authentically, rather than continually avoiding it or compensating for it.
So we should probably leave our listeners with something to chew on, a final provocative thought.
Yeah, building on that idea of exposure, maybe something like this. What is one small, authentic action you could take this week? One genuine truth you could perhaps reveal, or one boundary you could set? Something you currently avoid doing out of that old fear of being truly seen.
Just one small step towards authenticity.
Just one small step. That's where the journey begins.